I am the light in this world.
Hi, we are recording now. You're with Reverend Mike McMorrow and Malayna Dawn here
And
on
my aura.
And His Aura Thoughts on Talks. And I brought an extra light to see if it would help us look any brighter to match our inner light. And instead, it
I'm now a darker
inspired
shade of
shenanigans.
pink.
What color did you used to color people with crayons like as a kid? What color did you use? I would use peach.
I used flesh.
You had a flesh tone crayon?
Well, if you paid enough to get the
The
64
64?
box
I
with
don't
the
know. I don't
with the
remember flesh.
crayon
Yeah, the
sharpener in the
sharpener in
back.
it. Really? They had flesh? I don't know. Fact checking will occur later. So, as I said, welcome. I don't know if I said it, but I'm going to say it now. Welcome to Thoughts on Talks. And today we're going to be talking about Reverend Mike McMorrow's Sunday talk. Well, we're going to start there.
Okay.
Yesterday, which was January 5th.
Yesterday.
So if you question if this conversation has anything to do with that talk, you can always go back and watch that talk on the Center's YouTube channel, which is probably where you're watching this, and see if they connect at all, because we can't guarantee anything. This show, Thoughts on Talks, is deep dives and digressions.
It's a pinball wizard. It's got to be a hit.
You're kicking the table. And
sorry.
Does the pinball wizard?
That's the way my brain
It must
works.
be the green
flip,
tea.
Flip.
That's why the digressions. Yes. So yesterday the talk was actually called The Thing Itself, I think, wasn't it?
Correcto.
Okay. And the part that I like best, or that was maybe new to me, so that's why I remember it most, was the stuff about connecting science and scientific theory to religion and spirituality, which it's religious science, so it seems like
it's kind of
that's
a common
the thing itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it made me think of a documentary series, just 3 episodes that I saw on. It's on the Acorn channel, which I access through Amazon Prime, and it's British series for the most part. Be careful with knocking that cup. You're knocking the table. It's going to look like an earthquake. Or maybe that's what you were going
since
for.
We're quoting in English.
That's right. Pinky. So the show is called Magic Numbers, Hannah Fry's Mysterious World of Maths. I'm looking down to make sure I got maths, because in the UK, mathematics gets shortened to maths.
Yeah, that's weird.
Americans just say math.
I thought the dude I was watching had a lisp for the longest time. Maths.
Yes. Yeah. So she says maths a lot in it because she is herself British. But it's a really interesting, the 3 episodes. The first one is called Numbers as God. Second one, Expanded Horizons, and the third one is Weirder and Weirder, which goes into quantum physics.
Ooh, I may have to look this up.
It's very cool, and I'm sure, I'm hoping anyway, that it's available somewhere other than Acorn, but you might like some of the British series, or Stephanie might like them.
Stephanie will for sure.
Okay.
She's on this Welsh BBC binge.
Ah, okay. So then maybe.
What did they say?
Maybe she already has Acorn. I watch everything on subtitles, whether they're speaking American English, British English, whatever.
Right.
Because I like words and I like looking at them, and I like just making sure what they said. So
got it.
The thing that I thought was coolest, and I posted this to my Flourish page, in the Weirder and Weirder one about quantum physics.
Yes.
Now the word went out of my head. The process by which plants make sun into energy.
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. I was thinking phyto something, and I knew it was wrong. PHYTO, not FIDO. That would be a whole other tangent.
Yes, that would be canine.
Right. So photosynthesis is a quantum process, and they are now finding that that's how plants are so efficient in sharing the energy that they get from sunlight. Is if one cell captures the light, it shares it instantaneously with all the other cells. So I loved that because of the
sounds
nature
like
angle.
socialism to me.
Plant socialism,
Socialism.
Yeah.
Don't tell Bernie.
I don't know. He might like it.
He might.
Yeah. So that's just one of the things. I found the series really inspiring. And that's what I thought of when I heard your talk, which means it was also inspiring.
Oh, good.
It stopped
It's
you
good
from
to know
sipping.
at
You were
least
so
one
happy.
person is being inspired.
Well, it's not often that I can recall hearing E equals MC squared used in a Sunday talk.
Well, consider the source.
Yeah.
No, I've been watching a lot of different YouTube videos. I spent a lot of time on YouTube, screwing around, and just happened upon a series of various takes on Einstein, and how much pushback he got when he presented his theories on
relativity
and light and the what do they call it, the conservation of matter, right? Things we learn in chemistry class in
I
high
didn't
school.
take chemistry.
Oh, you're so lucky. I took it like 3 times, and still stoichiometry is one of the cosmic mysteries of life.
The word itself, I think it has stoic in it, does it? That's how it's spelled in my head.
That's just because you have to try and look cool while you're completely confused.
Yeah, I took like earth sciences instead of physics. So I learned about earthquakes, which I thought was good for living in Southern California.
Yeah, do you know they didn't even teach plate tectonics when I was in school? Yeah. It wasn't until I went back in my 30s and they started talking about tectonics. I knew it. Because I would stare at the globe and I would go, like Africa and South America, they look like they
kind of fit.
Fit.
Yeah. And
of course, when I bring that up in the middle of math class, I get my McMorrow, pay attention.
Yeah, because you're curious and you were thinking of all the connections that they didn't want you to think about for yourself.
I was a creative mofo, and my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Clark, didn't recognize that. I saw that in that moment instantaneously, and I was able to pick up yet another resentment, which is awesome.
But you let go of all that in the burning bowl, right? You're not carrying that around. Well, it is challenging when, as a student, you can tell that your teacher isn't maybe as smart as you, or maybe just doesn't get it.
I think it was very challenging for Mrs. Clark just to have me in class.
Okay, that's a nicer way of saying it. That you're the challenging one, not the teacher failing you somehow.
Because I was bright enough, but had zippo motivation.
Oh.
Unless it was something fun.
Well, I mean,
which pretty much eliminates most of school.
Most of life.
PE.
Most of adulting is less fun than cracking wise.
Yes.
So how are we going to tie this back to what we were talking about? E equals MC squared, Einstein.
Yeah, well, E equals MC squared is the idea that energy and matter are equivalent.
That's what the equal sign is.
Yes. And
the C is a constant? Is that what that stands for?
The cosmological constant, which my understanding from the YouTube videos that I was watching has something to do with the speed of light. So, and that's where the whole relativity thing, I got to tell you, how this guy thought about any of this stuff is pretty amazing because...
Yeah, he was just pondering possibilities with very little information to base it on and no way of testing a lot of it. One of the things in the series I saw showed that when astronauts went to the moon, they tested some of the stuff because there was no gravity, so you could see if what he posited was true. Right. And they showed footage of an astronaut saying, well, I guess Einstein was right.
Well, and they just now finished building, the last 5 years or so, this gigantic, what would you call it? A gigantic instrument that actually sounds like a big old reverb chamber, but I don't know that that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
But it measures gravity waves, because that was another idea that was posited from Einstein's, because he had, I think, 4 major theories.
Okay. Everything I know about Einstein, I learned from the movie IQ, which starred Meg Ryan and Tim Robbins and Walter Matthau. That's how I learned things.
Well, I will go back and revisit that and see if there's anything I can use.
It's cute because it makes his ideas more human and relatable, because it's told in this very sweet storyline. And so you could see some of the inspiration and how he had a group of friends who were also scientists and mathematicians, and who he could bounce ideas off of. And it's a sweet movie. I'm not sure how based in reality it is, but it helped me learn and remember and connect to Einstein.
Well, where I was going with all that, of course, is that thought is a unit of energy. And so he's speaking to the idea of energy and matter being equivalent. And of course, what we're speaking to, and on some level, quantum physicists are playing around with it, although they're not saying it exactly for obvious reasons, that the universe and the matter contained within it does appear to have consciousness to some degree. And so, to me, this presents an interesting question, right? So if, in fact, the Big Bang is this idea, as Richard Rohr speaks to, is that the spirit, God consciousness, whatever you call it, which is in the spirit realm or in this other reality, and then all of a sudden, blammo, the Big Bang, then that would mean that this would be the first incarnation of the divine, then, with the Big Bang. And then speaking to the person of Jesus, which really could be all of us and are the second incarnation, right? As we are all conscious beings.
Right.
And conscious of being conscious. So I don't know, like, I love my dog and I think my dog is cute and so forth, but I really think he's more driven by food and by attention, praise, more than thinking about thinking. I don't think he's really working out, my life would be a lot easier if I just learned to use the dog door and take my business outside.
Maybe not thinking about thinking, but I do believe there's an element of love involved. It's not just training and conditioning and response. I really feel is choice and connection and memory of love, memory of joy.
Yeah, there's something going on there.
Yeah.
And so the teacher, Thomas Troward, called this degrees of livingness. But we don't, I think it's easy for us to see how that could be possible in living or animate matter, from single cell on up to more complex systems. But now they're even saying rocks, right, or minerals, whatever, where before you wouldn't think such a thing.
Right.
But, and then, of course, the idea then that even a solid piece of granite has a lot more space in it than it does, than it is solid.
Right.
So when you start thinking about these things on these subatomic levels, it's quite mind-bending.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of wiggle room in there for when we consider the nature of thought and the possibility that our thought is affecting reality in some way, which of course it does.
Yeah.
Right? From a psychological experience, perception, most of us would say that's kind of a self-evident
well,
truth.
that we affect our experience of it, but quantum physics says we're affecting the things that we're observing outside of ourselves just by our observation.
Right. Which, if you think about it, that's what any prayer is.
Yeah.
Right? So, but instead of praying to a saint or to God in a petitionary way, what we're playing around with the idea is that there is a natural law at work here, that the spirit is reacting to our thought within its own parameters, which it set up.
And we can participate in that.
Correct.
That process.
Right. And so the idea is because the idea that if we are made in the image and likeness of the divine, then everything that we do is a reflection of that.
Right.
And that's where all these ideas come from. But there's lots of room, and we have to make a lot of room for the divine to step in. Otherwise, it's just some big egocentric, look how wonderful I am.
Or even less than that, just survival mentality of I have to do this to get this so that I can do this. So that, and that doesn't really fill most of us with joy when we think about living on that survival. I mean,
and let's face it, that's how many people on the earth still live today. And so really it's kind of a privilege to even be able to consider life from such a perspective.
Right. So let's see, there was a quote that you said.
How do we do with that anyway?
How do we do what?
Do we tie all that in?
I don't know. Okay. I'm moving on.
Okay, good.
It felt good enough to me. I was looking for a quote, and maybe it's on here on your slides. It was something about we may not believe in miracles.
Oh.
Are you offering me your glasses so I can read your slides?
Yeah.
The scientific religionist cannot believe in miracles, but he or she will not deny the power of spiritual thought. Rather, the scientific religionist will think that the so-called miracles performed as a result of spiritual faith, it's kind of what you said, have been in accord with natural law and cosmic order. Because you wrote this, right? This isn't a quote. I'm quoting you.
No, I wish it was.
Oh, okay.
That's Ernest Holmes, and it's from the book How to Change Your Life.
Okay.
And let's see, that's on page 213.
All right. So the rest of the quote, after have been in accord with natural law and cosmic order, and that they can be produced at will. That which the illumined have experienced, and that which persons of great spiritual power have proven or proved, the scientific religionist feels can be deliberately used in everyday life. I think part of me bristled, or maybe not bristled, but resonated, but in a bristly way, about cannot believe in miracles, because there's a part of me that's really struggling with that lately, that I grew up believing that prayer made a difference and seeing evidence of it. And then lately I feel like when I jump in and try to recapture that connection and that feeling that I am participating in bringing something positive about, and then I see that it didn't seem to occur, at least the way that I envisioned it, it makes me think, oh, okay, so maybe it doesn't work, or maybe I don't understand, or maybe I have to shift my thoughts
there's always a demonstration.
Okay.
There is always a demonstration.
It just may not look like I was envisioning it.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, but the idea of not believing in miracles, it's really kind of a semantic thing.
Okay.
Because it appears to be miraculous.
Right.
Right. But the point he's making is, it's the reason why it's not a miracle is that it's the natural response of thought to mind acting as law. So when we do our spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer, we're doing so with a sense of expectancy, just in the same way as when we, hold up a ball and release it, we expect it to fall to the earth. And we may not even understand, the
mechanics of it.
Newton's mechanics or Einstein's ideas. They were two different things. But we don't need to know that the ball is going to fall.
Right.
And so in the same way that we use this cosmic law of life in the same way, knowing that our thought is impressing itself upon an aspect of the very mind of the spirit itself, acting as law that knows only to say yes. Now, the caveat to that is, as Jesus said, is that it's done unto us as we believe. And so sometimes it appears that our treatments are not demonstrating.
Okay.
But they are. And so it's up to us to see if it's incomplete or not as effective, right? So then it's time to kind of take inventory and see, okay, so where is the blockage in my belief?
Right. Or the missed connection or disconnection.
Yeah, whatever it is. So
yeah. Okay. So I'll give you an example, and a few things come to mind as you're saying that. One,
start with an easy one first.
I'll try. The instance I was thinking of. Oh gosh, I'm talking about me.
Okay.
Oh, so good. I don't think I have much in common with that particular individual. Thank you. So it was a day that I was helping a family member. I was picking up stuff and delivering it and doing stuff for their business.
Okay.
And in my attempt to help, I used the wrong business account, and there was going to be a big bill hitting.
Overdraft.
Yeah. And it had caused problems before. And so we tried to reverse the charge so that it wouldn't be on that credit card, but it was probably too late. And so when I called the family member and said, I don't know what's going to happen there, it was like major stress and frustration. And that this payment is going to hit right when all of this mix-up is going on, even though we've been waiting for days and days. And so I couldn't do anything else in that moment to help or change in the way of like dealing with financial institutions or canceling payments I couldn't do anything. I had no control over any of it. Right. And so all I could do was pray. And that day, as I had been driving around running these errands, I kept being reminded, I might tear up right now, of friends that had passed. So I was driving past where a few people lived that had passed away. And then, it's just like 5 people earlier in that day I had been reminded of. And so I thought, okay, I'm driving around hanging out with the dead today. So all of you, I need all of your spirits on this case. We're going to make this work, and it's going to be smooth, and, gather we've got help from the sirens. I don't know if you can hear it. Help is coming. And later checked, and it looked like the big bill that was coming had hit, but there was enough money in the account. And I thought, oh, prayer works. And I told my family member, hey, prayer works. I had all the people on the case. And
nevertheless,
it was like, oh no, it was me. I transferred money or I deposited a check. So the demonstration did happen.
We take our good where we find it.
But it was, and it's true, I had no control over that account. It wasn't my account. I couldn't do anything else. I was feeling bad because I messed it up in trying to help. But
it would see, to me, that's still a demonstration.
Okay.
Because and this kind of speaks to what it is that we're playing around with in the science of mind. Mm-hmm. We are really broadening the idea of what God consciousness is. And we are making this bold claim that it is expressing as everything, right? Mm-hmm. So expressing as creative intelligence that inspires one of the players in this little life drama that's unfolding. You know, I'm just going to move some money over, right?
Yeah.
Because this person could have just been oblivious and just went, oh my God, my hair's on fire. It's going to,
right.
And I'm going to have to pay a fee. And
yeah.
Right. And, you know, if you think about it, a lot of things in life work that way. Right. So so we have an error.
Right.
We make a mistake. Okay. So there's going to be consequences to the error. But then there's the interest that we pay on the error with all the self-inflicted angst and drama.
And self-flagellation.
Yeah. So to me, that's still a demonstration. So I'll give you another example. I had someone who I worked with as a practitioner, who was having a hard time working with someone in her office.
Okay.
And so that was the focus through this class that we were doing on this particular situation. And then through a series of circumstances, this person just moved away and got busy doing other things. But this work situation was a pesky one because it lasted for, I don't know, a year, right? And just keep one of those office things. So I ran into this person maybe 2 years after this. And just getting briefly caught up, you know, the way you do when you haven't seen someone in a while. And I said, so how'd that, I said, so how are things going? Oh, you know, it's great. You know, I got transferred to Van Nuys. And so now I just work like 15 minutes from home and I'm not on the train every day and I don't have to walk from the train station to my office. And it's just so less stressful. And I said, oh, so you got a transfer? Oh, yeah. I said, well, did that woman in your office get transferred with you? Oh, no. Well, that sounds like a demonstration to me.
Right.
Right? So when we broaden it and we don't try to hamstring the spirit by outlining how it's supposed to happen.
Right.
Right? Now, the timeline is sometimes inconvenient, right?
Yeah.
The possibility exists, though, for it to happen instantaneously. And I don't like to get into calling people out on their belief around such things as an obstacle. But, you know, in theory, that's what it is.
Right.
But I don't find that helpful.
Well,
right? For me to say, well, geez, what was in your consciousness that you went and used that card to begin with? You need to be more mindful.
That's not helpful. You're right.
That's not
that doesn't feel helpful at all.
It's not a healing modality.
No.
Right? If anything, to be in recrimination,
right,
just gets people even more knotted up, so that they forget something else, or they get, you know, they're in the company car and they get in an accident because they're thinking about the fact that the boss just chewed their ass over some, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So there are a lot of other circumstances that we're co-creating every moment with.
Yeah.
So we we do have the power to participate, but we don't have the power to control, right?
Well, the theory is that we can control circumstances and conditions through the power of thought. That is one of our declarations of principles.
Okay.
So, I mean, here's another scenario, right? So we do our treatment work, and just knowing that everything is working in right and perfect order, and that the universe, every aspect from every process, every person involved in processing the order and the computer stuff, and everything is conspiring for a successful outcome around this situation. And, you know, lo and behold, you know, it gets parked somewhere electronically, and, you know, enough hours pass to where everything is covered, right? So, I mean, I've seen some really crazy things happen that way, particularly, you know, like, so for instance, let's say you're going in for an operation, right? And so when I do treatment for people who are having a medical condition, I throw everyone in there.
Yeah.
The insurance, the person doing the insurance claim, the receptionist, the parking attendant at the hospital, the surgeon, the anesthesia, the person who's wiping the brow. I mean, everybody gets covered in there, and everyone is, including the patient, is working in concert to co-create this successful outcome around, to produce a successful operation, no pun intended. And I think we really need, when we're working with spiritual mind treatment, which is really this week, we're talking about getting right with the spirit and really broadening our understanding of what the spirit is.
And it's kind of like taking off our blinders, taking off any box that we put the spirit in, saying it has to work this way, because that's all we can imagine. Yeah. So it's knocking the sides off the box, and
it's always more than we think it is. Always. Yeah.
And
it's
we're
more than
evolving.
Pope Francis thinks it is, or the Dalai Lama, or Mother Teresa, God bless her soul, wherever she is. It's more than that.
So and going back to,
I would just say, I think that people, particularly lay people who come to whatever church, I think a lot of what gets in the way is they think they're not worthy. Yeah. And that, I think, is the biggest lie that we can tell ourselves.
And the biggest obstacle then too.
Because this idea, what you brought up, so if it's love and only love, let's say love is that energy that we're talking, love's the drug, I'm thinking love. So if it's that kind of thing, right, then if it really is just love, this energy idea, then, and cosmic love, not some kind of crazy human, you know, do what I want. One of these days, Alice, pow,
transactional, would transactional be kind of the...
Exactly. Yeah. And so when we're talking about cosmic love, the transactional component is eliminated, and so that is how laws are impersonal. So it's kind of a love that is so pure that it's personal and yet operates in an impersonal way, because it's just like always saying, well, of course, yes.
So I'm trying to translate that to,
but you still gotta ask,
like taxes. Seeing that as cosmic love, because that was the bill that was like a tax payment was waiting to hit.
You didn't say it was taxes.
That's a different law altogether. No, it can't be.
No, but I mean, especially there.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially there.
There are lots of opportunities to put resentments in the way of spirit moving.
The state can be. I mean, the spirit can definitely be cleverly camouflaged within the state equalization board, right? For sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they can be unforgiving. But all of it is a mental construct. All of it is a thought construct.
Right. So this this series, the Magic Numbers series that I was talking about earlier, it started with the question of, is math created or discovered? Like, has math and the language of the universe and the laws of the universe just been there waiting for us to understand them? Or have we created this framework and then made it fit for our own self? And so they talk to mathematicians and scientists all over the world.
That's pretty deep for a math nerd.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it was inspiring to me, because it was spiritual.
They must not have been speaking to engineers. They must have had some humanities students in there.
No, I didn't see any humanities. They had some theoretical mathematicians and physicists.
So what was the consensus?
The consensus was that it's both. That as our understanding of the world develops, then we see more, and we understand more, and then we create a language that helps us sort of track it and play with it. So it's
well, you know, that's interesting, because if you just think about, you know, taking it back to E equals MC squared, right? Mm-hmm. So was it Copernicus was the one who, so in the beginning, we thought everything revolved around the earth. Mm-hmm. And then Copernicus somehow worked out that everything revolves around the sun. Mm-hmm. And then Newton worked out that everything that it's a mechanical universe. Now, the thing that was interesting about that, though, and this ties into what you were just saying about these guys, Einstein thought he had it wrong. He thought his theory of relativity was all screwed up, and it was because everything worked within our own solar system to mathematical precision, except the orbit of Mercury. They couldn't get it to work out. And it was when, and don't ask me how, Einstein applied his theory to this crazy orbit, because it wasn't a nice clean orbit, but it, you know, it kind of does one of these spirograph things. Okay. That's the way I think of it. Then it worked.
Okay.
Right. So everyone was, Newton's a dude, right? For hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. Right. He's a dude. He worked it out. You know, the universe is like a clock.
Right.
Right.
And that was the science of the time, is everybody's learning how to use clockwork mechanisms and steam engines with clockwork mechanisms to make everything work. And the Industrial Revolution happened, and that's how we understood the world.
Right.
And now we're seeing that there's more. It's not, that works, but there's even more involved. There's levels.
And so that gravity is actually just space-time being warped by mass. Mm-hmm. You know, talk about metaphysics, man.
Right.
And completely redefined a whole branch of our understanding, just like you were saying. Right. Yeah. Because for the longest time, it was only theoretical and they couldn't prove it. Right.
Yeah.
So they were waiting for this eclipse to happen.
Right.
And anyway, it's a very interesting story if you ever care to. The easiest way is to watch it on YouTube.
Okay.
Just saying.
All right.
It only takes about 15 minutes to explain.
The theory, the E equals MC squared?
No, just how they proved it.
Okay.
I don't know that. I don't know how anyone could. To me, it's just, you know, this is the idea that intelligence, like this field of mind, the cosmic mind, is everywhere present, right?
And some people are open enough,
right?
And
a trained mind is more powerful than an untrained mind. So I can access this mind and figure out how to cut a hip rafter, which most carpenters don't know how to do.
Okay.
Right. But I can't do quantum physics. And I'm sure Einstein would not be able to cut a hip rafter.
He actually didn't agree with quantum physics. He said God does not play dice with the universe. He didn't like the randomness of it, or the seeming randomness of it. And so this series and all the others I've seen about quantum physics do say that the laws are different at the subatomic level.
Correct.
And the understanding I got, and I'm not sure if it was just my own reasoning or from this series, but because at the subatomic level, the mass is so little, it's
Correct.
so small, it doesn't have the same effect. And so things are more floaty.
Right. Well, that's the unified field theory that Einstein, you know, was not able to develop.
Right.
However, the way that I understand it now is that this idea of a unified field works if you take in like 10 dimensions.
Whoa.
Now you talk about, these are like mega nerds. I don't even know, right? These are like, you know, probably the grandchildren of nerds. But I mean, you would have to like, you know, mate two nerds to each other.
Now you're going into genetics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how they get there, but because I remember reading about this in the Wall Street Journal of all places. And then there's this whole thing about brain theory and BRANE, membrane theory, which is like a variation of string theory.
Okay.
But anyway, it's I guess the point is that there's enough sloppiness in there for metaphysics. To me, it just makes room for metaphysics.
Right.
And because I'm a believer. So I don't know what people who don't believe in a divine something, although the guy, that fellow who's the astronomer out of the University of Arizona, who's an atheist, he says, you know, there's enough going on. I mean, that doesn't mean that I don't feel awe.
Right.
Right. I just don't want to attribute it to some supreme being. And you know what? Neither do I.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
I mean,
you just have to redefine what the divine
well, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah.
When you broaden what it could be, right? So if it's you know, so a secular scientist who doesn't believe in God wants to call it a quantum field, right?
Yeah.
Where a spiritualist would say, well, you know, it's the mind of the divine, right? So this kind of, whether it's mathematics or God, right? So is man creating God in its own image and likeness, or is God dispersed throughout all of creation so that through the logical coalescing of matter through billions of years, man is the logical expression of this cosmic event that attains consciousness and then becomes conscious of something greater than it is. How can that be? Does it really matter? It's kind of like a chicken egg thing.
Right. It brings to mind the paradox, the idea of paradox, that both can be true. Correct. That there is this wider something, higher power, divine mind, what, you know, you had like a million names on a slide on Sunday, whatever you call it, that exists. But at the same time, we're trying to understand it. So we're creating what we can understand at the time. Right. So it's like, you know, Ken Wilber's spiral dynamics theory, where we evolve our understanding. And
well, or even as Jesus said, right? I leave you with the Holy Spirit. Right?
How was that spelled in the Bible?
I think, well, you know, again, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how, when I was a kid, it went from Holy Ghost to Holy, because, you know, people believed in ghosts for a long time. I mean, look at the Cowardly Lion.
I think.
When push came to shove, I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks. But, you know, most people don't really. Now, I'm sorry. Let me back up.
Possible.
I know many people who have had paranormal experiences. I have not. You know, but I'm not discounting the fact that it could be possible.
And I think at in other times, and
like
true,
doing this. Oh, right.
Yes, and I think at times in history where people were generally
hands on the computer, and I'm lifting the computer right now.
You were shaking the table with your knee while you did that, which nobody could see or really take in.
I can do two things at once.
Anyway. At times when people were less informed about how the world.
If they're watching this right now,
no,
don't encourage them.
If they're watching it still, they were like
they may have
they moved over to YouTube and clicked on something else.
They switched off at Copernicus.
But I don't even know what I was going to say now.
Sorry.
I think it was about ghosts. When people lived almost entirely in making up how things work, for like we would call it superstition now, but it was based on the information they had about how things worked and what they saw and experienced, then maybe there was a much more prevalent sense of ghosts being among us all the time, or seeing them all the time. Or
that's what the whole thing with Halloween is, right?
Yeah.
At least from the Celtic perspective, that
right.
The veil between the realms is very thin on the. Well, that's not the equinox.
It could be. It's the
my brain just went.
Yeah, now we're both not equinox, but
equinox
people are like yelling at their screens right now. I'm looking it up.
Call in right now.
Oh, and now my computer's trying to get me to make travel plans.
Call in.
All right, we know what it is. The thing that's not the equinox, but it's the other thing. Yeah.
Not solstice.
No.
Equinox is the summer.
Is it solstice and equinox? Is that the two different things?
Summer solstice. Vernal equinox and
equinox. Let's see. There are two solstices and two equinoxes.
And the vernal equinox is the spring, correct?
Right.
And then
autumnal, I think, is the other one. It's too obvious. You're trying to think of these high Latin.
It's fall, okay.
It's just a good time for the veil to be thin between worlds.
Yeah.
I had a thought once that maybe ghosts were actually like a quantum thing of like people experimenting with time travel or time loops or who knows what, because I get all science fiction-y, but that it's not ghosts, it's actually some kind of other way that a veil can be thin.
Well, and if there are other dimensions, like we were talking about this idea that you need 10 dimensions for this unified field thing to work out, which that means that they could just be in a whole nother realm. And I think that is, in fact, what people would explain that experience of, like Dr. Mary Helen, right? The gal from Athlone. She's been here a couple times. I mean, it's totally her reality. And when she talks about it, I believe her. And, I've met other people like that, and that she's really good at articulating what the experience is like also. So I don't know, man. I mean, look at the Abraham thing, right?
Right, yeah.
So
Abraham Hicks.
Yeah. I mean, and Esther Hicks is brilliant. And she speaks to a lot of the same things that we do. But it just, the idea that she's channeling some entity that's, wise
and ancient and
it's trippy to me. It's like, I can go for the God thing, but that's as far as I can get,
Yeah,
and yet, I don't know. If you're going to believe in the divine in some way, then these other things should actually be considered.
Possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
If all things are possible, yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing about death, right?
That we don't know what happens.
Yeah.
And nobody's reported back in any way that we can rely on.
But, but we're going to know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will be kind of like, what if we just like cross over the other side and like go, oh, whoa, really? Shit. I wish I'd have known that on the other side. Right?
Yeah. Well,
I'd have fretted over all those payments and God,
mm-hmm.
when all I had to know was this cosmic simplicity of some kind.
Mm-hmm. I like the movie What Dreams May Come. Have you seen that? It's an old movie. Yeah. So it's basically that the afterlife is whatever you believe it is. Whatever you can imagine or envision.
Right.
You can do.
Yeah. And then, let's see. And he went somewhere to get somebody's soul or something, right?
Right.
So his suicide.
Right. And so she had been trapped in a prison of her own making in her own consciousness when she committed suicide. So that goes to we're not punished by
our sin.
Yeah, but
or for our sin, but by our sin. Yeah.
So she was just so lost in her spirit that she stayed in that sad box, even on the other side.
Right.
And so he found her. He had to go from the world where like he was living in a painting and people were flying and there were, it was a beautiful work of art that he was living in and experiencing.
Gooding Jr. was like his
it was like
son or daughter.
Yeah, that had passed.
Yeah, anyway.
And Robin Williams was the star who, when we say he, we're talking about him. And so he went to find his wife and convince her that she didn't have to stay there, that she could accept the love that was being given to her and accept that everything was laid out before her. All she had to do was step into it. And it took some convincing, but he did it. But then you were going to mention that Robin Williams in real life, at least the reports we have, are that he took his own life, which really messed me up.
Yeah.
Because I found him so inspiring for so long. And it really, more and more as I learn about the backstories of pretty much, any celebrity, any great person, anybody who's had a really huge impact on the world, it doesn't mean that their life is without challenges or pain or, that everybody everywhere has something that's causing them difficulties. And so
it's a human condition.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, and we're co-creating that. So you could have, you could be Bucks Deluxe and swimming in dough and not have any concerns in that realm, right? But would still experience loss to anything that you're attached to.
Right.
So many of us think, well, geez, if I just had this. I remember in the what was that, the 80s, I was following silver for years.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, if I just had 10 grand, right? And I was also following Flying Tiger Airlines.
Okay.
And I would look these guys up and I'd look up silver and I'd think, okay, and then I would make this move and that move. Boy, if I just had 10 grand. And then I got 10 grand. And you know what I did? I stuck it in a money market account because I was too afraid to do anything with it.
And can you look back now and see what would have happened if you had done the thing you thought of?
No, to me, the moral of that story is, you can't get anything accomplished if you're afraid to make a move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of that was just like, part of my identity, and I'm something more than a carpenter. I'm actually a genius in finance, right? And so once I kind of caught myself into that, I was like, oh yeah, you're a real captain of industry there, bud. Right? But when you work, because it didn't fall in my lap, it was something that I had
worked for.
So,
and sometimes when things do fall in your lap, like I'm thinking of some friends I met with, and they were sharing an experience of spending time with very wealthy people, and they were seeing how those people seem very lost because they didn't have to work for anything. They didn't have to make an effort and take a risk. And so they didn't develop character in the same way that people from the working class have gotten used to dealing with life. And
right.
So, I mean, it could be something as simple as just two different paradigms not understanding each other, but there's something to be said for having purpose. And sometimes people who have everything handed to them.
Right. Just watch Downton Abbey.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I watch plenty of Downton Abbey.
Yeah. Well, the Dowager, or however you say that.
Dowager, Countess.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. I mean, the thing that she just can't live without. I do not know how those servants didn't take like a handkerchief. Put her out of her misery.
The whole idea of servants and upstairs, masters, downstairs, and all that. Yeah. That's a consciousness thing too, sure. which
they actually explored, right? Yeah. So the Irish fellow who marries the young daughter, right?
He started as the chauffeur, and but if
and the consciousness of the nobles,
right?
This is why we really don't want an aristocracy in America. Watch that show. But
right.
They had their own little,
way of doing things
and seeing the world.
And it took a middle class guy to give the ideas that could help them survive.
Right. And to threaten to raise his daughter as a Catholic. Yeah.
So we can learn everything we need from Downton Abbey. Is that what you're
their
saying?
Anglican feathers.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
anyway, back to the thing itself.
The thing itself is experienced by all the peoples of all the times.
At whatever level of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, the one thing that show has made me appreciate the American experience more, even though it is much more difficult, I think, than in years past, because everything has become so corporate now.
Yeah.
I mean, there used to be, you can still start a small business and maybe eke out a living. But, it's challenging now, because you are competing, like take something like a print shop, right? And how are you supposed to compete against Vista?
Right.
Right. So, that's just one little niche,
Yeah.
I saw it in the Christmas tree business, when I was back when I was doing that. And then before I got out of contracting, Home Depot was even doing contracting.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah,
if they find a little vein.
Well, and my experience lately has been when I'm dealing with one of those huge conglomerates and I can't find one human being that I can talk to and get an answer from.
Right. And yet in small business, right? So the small businessman lives and dies by his reputation. And,
and things get lost in huge conglomerates.
There's so much, and so much work does get handled by small businesses. And, it's, anyway, speaking to creative activity and creative intelligence, the idea of thought as a thought form,
Mm-hmm.
as a unit of energy, is someone who gets that idea of to go into business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then calling forward and calling forth the people and the material to bring this thing to birth this business. To me, it's a wonderful demonstration of how this teaching can work, because it really is creating something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And all of the, even as I, grouse about, the corporatization of everything, most corporations started out as, a small business way back when. So, so next week when we start, now we're going to take this idea of expanding our awareness and cultivating and looking for how the spirit is part of all of life and is expressing itself in, through, and as all of life, including our life. And then how can we actually then use that knowledge and that experience of that's something that goes beyond a devotional practice, which I think is natural and important, but also to use it as a tool to help make our own lives better, and then, and if we're not making the lives of those around us better, then it's not much fun. Not much fun. It's not much of a religion if all you're doing is tending your own field.
Right.
But the world would be a lot easier place if we all did that also.
Tended our own fields.
At least, or tend to our own consciousness. Right.
Yeah.
And never mind. As they say in yoga, keep your eyes on your own mat.
Right. Not try to boss around, control, or poke your nose into other people's business. Yeah. But maybe partner with or co-create with, or, there's still room for interaction.
Correct.
Even if you're taking care of your own spiritual and emotional well-being.
And that's the test of the practice, right? Is how you get along with others. It's like the idea of the hermit, right? Who lives up in the cave above the village and, achieves some sense of, enlightenment or what have you. And he comes down and somebody pisses him off as soon as he's not in the village more than 5 minutes. Right? And someone angers him, right? And he realizes, oh, yeah, okay.
I didn't learn all that much. Yeah, it has to be useful in life.
I don't know how the Dalai Lama does his gig, right?
Yeah.
So, man without a country in a way, and still seems to be pretty amused by it all.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's
another rabbit hole for
another day.
Another Warren.
So we've kind of started with like back to basics of religious science with your talks anyway, not necessarily our digressions. Our digressions are more, speculation about all of this. Yes. So I think we've done all we can do here today.
Probably too much.
All right. So, I didn't even show our little logo. Oh, well, I'll add it to the somewhere. People have seen it. It was on last week's. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And come back next week when we have no idea what we'll be talking about.
We'll be talking about the law, man.
Yeah.
I thought the law and the law won.
And listening to more pop hits from Reverend Mike. Okay. Bye.
Love you. Bye.